Hi, today's presentation is a little bit different. Basically, I had this presentation I had to make this semester for seminar, and I have the slides already done, so I thought I'd adapt them a little bit and, you know, also present it here because, knowledge is power and all that. I like teaching people things, so here's the presentation. I removed some of the data, such as my name and the company's name. Also, you might find that this presentation sounds a bit weird. It's because we have the background of knowing the company's methods, whereas you don't. But I'll try to fill you all in. And you'll have to trust me when I say that a company does or doesn't do a certain thing. So the theme is, well, the name of the presentation is Security by Design, its definition and real-life application. So, why this presentation? Basically, security by design is a broad principle. It means that security is taken into account since the design of a system, of a product. It's also extremely reasonable. However, security has different meanings for different people. Still, companies will use security by design as a term, because once again, it sounds wonderful. Good, it's a good idea. Your investors will love it. Your workers who care about security will love it. It's a good thing. However, security by design has guidelines. It has tenets you have to follow, much like zero trust. So there comes the question, do these companies follow security by design guidelines, or are they simply taking security into account since the design of the product? So now I will talk about security by design principles. We'll mention the company's approach and we'll draw some conclusions. So, security by design has 7 major principles. It's based off. These principles are based off of the 7 foundation principles of privacy by design. Privacy by design is prior to security by design. If you look at both principles, they are basically rephrased from privacy to security. The main like tagline is the same or slightly adapted. Instead of having like privacy as default, it's security by default, but it's all basically the same. It's changing the scope of privacy by design into security itself. The first principle is proactive, not reactive, preventative, not remedial. It means that security measures must not be reactive and not remedial when it comes to attacks and other security issues, and instead being proactive, making your applications harder to attack, and preventative, as in preventing attacks at the company level. This also means that the proactive stance means that workers will need to have security, like the company will have to supply security training and stuff like that. It makes sense. You can't know about security if nobody teaches you. So yeah, this is the first of all. The second is default setting. So uh, security must be taken into account from right off the bat instead of being added later. This means that the paper itself mentions that this means that some security policies must be implemented, such as least privilege, which means that if you give something the privilege to do one thing, it can't mean they then can do a different thing. Then there's the policy of need to know. This is often used um, in military settings, such as, need to know basis. I'm only given the information I need to know to do this one thing. Least privilege is often applied to need to know as an application of least privilege, but to people and to knowledge, whereas least privilege is often applied to processes and stuff like that. Then there's least trust, which means that if you must trust something, first, minimize the amount of things, be it people, processes, machines, whatever. Minimize those elements you have to trust. Make it as low as possible. And when you must trust something, minimize the trust as possible, as much as possible. This can evolve into a full-blown zero trust implementation, taking into account that zero trust also has a plethora of tenets that must be complied with for you to be able to say it's a zero trust implementation, but still. Then there's mandatory access control. This makes sense if you're going to make security, if there's security that if there's security, there must be access control, obviously. If not, then anyone could have access to the stuff. Finally, there's segregation of duties. This is often used as a anti-fraud mechanism. For example, when you go to a bank, the person that takes your money can't be the same person who puts it in the vault. If it were, then the people who takes your money would write down that you put in the less money, put the amount of money they wrote into the vault, and then pocket the rest, and none would be any wiser. So yeah, these are some security policies that must be implemented. Obviously, you should also implement more, but these are just the basics. The third principle is embedding security into design. This has two main angles. There's the security and the hardware angle. The software and the hardware angle. Software angle focuses on software security assurance. There are many ways to do software security assurance. The specification for security by design acknowledges this and mentions that most software security assurance methods include full lifecycle approaches, comprehensive threat analysis, and so on, as is in the slide. However, there are also a plethora of other software security assurance methods. This just means that, there must be software security assurance. Then for hardware, it's basically using trusted computing bases, basically making sure the hardware itself has security measures using things such as TPM, Intel SGX, Intel TXT, and so on and so forth. It's normal that you're in security and don't know about these things because it's more low level. So don't worry, it's a thing, I guess. I had secure execution environments, but it was an option, so that's why I know these trusted computing bases. It's normal that you don't. Also, some of them are quite closed. For example, Intel SGX or Intel TXT. I'm working with Intel TXT. Well, my colleague was working with Intel TXT for his thesis, and I'm continuing his thesis. Hopefully, I don't have to touch Intel TXT. But these two things, anything Intel has the problem of they say some things, but their documentation isn't the best. Their standards are not exactly open, and sometimes they straight up just lie to you. My colleague had to contact Intel several times all throughout the writing of his thesis because of problems he found with TXT. SGX supposedly was being discontinued. I'm not sure. It's very old. It has a lot of problems. It's basically superfluous at this point. A lot of noisy channel stuff. It's not great. Anyway, the fourth, sorry about the whole hardware thing. The fourth principle is positive sum, not zero sum. Basically, security and privacy are seen as deterring, worsening the user experience. For example, my favorite example of this is two-factor authentication. You're adding security with, the second factor of authentication. However, you're making authentication harder to do because the end user requires a different device or something needs a second channel. So it makes a lot of users forego two-factor authentication. Here, positive sum, not zero sum, means that whenever security and privacy would cost the user or stakeholders anything, such as user experience and so on, the solution must come out as a win-win situation. So both security and the user or the stakeholder or whoever wins. This could be in the form of passwordless systems that use device specific tokens or something like that. I know I read a paper about that for environments, or was it identification? It was identification, sorry. But those are still a long way. Like there are no perfect authentication methods. There's nothing perfect about security. This is basically minimizing the points in which you have to minimizing the points at which you would make something. Sorry, I'm a bit scared today. This basically means that you should at least try to end in positive sum solutions and not zero sum solutions. Fifth principle is end-to-end security. This basically means that if you're developing a secure application, your enterprise premises must also be safe. This means that CIA principles, which are confidentiality, integrity, and availability, must be ensured all throughout the enterprise and not just the application itself. This means that the paper focuses that this means that the enterprise itself must have database security. They don't explain exactly what this entails, but you know, normal database security, I guess. And there also must be identity and access management. However, end-to-end security can come in many forms. However, you can see, if you know anything about security, that database security and identity and access management are like two of the most important stepping stones, especially when it comes to CIA, to the CIA triad. Sorry, not the CIA, the other CIA. The sixth principle is visibility and transparency. This is basically using open standards, using well-known processes, making sure that everything is that your efforts towards security are visible and you're transparent about it. So these open standards could entail using a well-known cipher system instead of implementing your own. It makes sense. For example, AES is more than tested at this point. RSA more than tested at this point. A in-house cipher not as well tested as RSA as AES and so on and so forth. Well-known processes basically applies the cipher thing to other, people-based processes. And external evaluation is basically so your company can have a paper that says, yeah, I care about security. I paid for my security to be evaluated. And you can see here, they tested it and I got a good or bad score. And I'm doing this, and this to make sure that, bad security is not a problem in the future. Uh, then the final principle is respect for the user. Basically, don't fuck the user up. Security is also a basic right. Don't let enterprise interests overshadow the users. Don't sell their data. Don't make attacks so easy that the user could have their data stolen, and so on and so forth. Basically, respecting the user because the user is a person. So, what does security by design at the company entail? Firstly, I'm going to use the information that I'm going to be basing this off of the information I got at my master's seminar. What you need to know is that they're a software house. I also will not be going into detail. I'm not going to explain everything they do because it was a 2-hour presentation. I can't go into all that detail, but they're a software house, they're kind of well known, and they did a presentation for my course. First principle, proactivity and preventing preventing is okay. The company supplies security education. There are two security teams, the offensive and the defensive, where the offensive attacks the both the company systems and the applications they're making, and the defensive teams do things. And the defensive team does things such as providing training and uh, just providing training and dealing with security events such as attacks, breaches, and so on. There are also a plethora of measures at the network level that make it so attacks can be prevented. They have malware analyzers, vulnerability scanners, and so on. They do a lot of things, and here they're hitting the nail in the head. However, often security by design is people say they use security by design when they're basically being proactive and preventing attacks instead of actually employing, and that comes into account here. On the second principle, so default setting, it was using all those employing all those policies I mentioned earlier. None of them were mentioned. This could be because they didn't think of mentioning them. This could also be because these policies depend on the application they're developing, the clients, and so on and so forth, but it's not mentioned. When it comes to embedded into design, it's a little bit tricky because although they don't mention hardware security, they mention that mobile apps only run on devices that aren't jailbroken, aren't rooted, and so on. They even have a library that checks, a security library that checks all this. It's in-house. Yeah. And some measures were mentioned. For example, they have code reviews. Sometimes they have just code reviews. I don't remember the rest, but they mentioned some of the things, but not all of the things that software security assurance entails. However, software security assurance doesn't have any. They could be using a different model, so it's all very maybe. Fourth, positive sum, no mention is made of conflicts that may arise. This might be because it depends on the client. It might mean that it depends on the application they're developing. It depends on a lot of things, but no mention is made, so we don't know. End-to-end security is another maybe, because although they have a lot of network level stuff like malware analyzers, vulnerability scanners, and so on, they don't mention access control, nor do they mention securing databases. This could be because they don't feel comfortable mentioning that they do these things in such and such a way. We don't know. Sixth principle, visibility and transparency. They don't mention using open standards, possibly because it depends on the client. If a client wants you to encrypt stuff with AES, you're gonna. If they want you to use a company-specific cipher, well, you're gonna. As for well-known processes, they do use some well-known processes such as risk analysis and management. I'm not sure if they use FMIA, but they use something quite similar. When it comes to external validation, it's also not really specific. They mention that they have client compliance, but when it comes to client compliance, yeah, the client's going to want to give you. The client will not have the same standards that an external evaluator will, because once the company that's developing a thing, the other's a client that will make money off of the thing that's being developed, and another is a company that's making money off of evaluating you. These three companies and people will have very different standards and very different processes and so on. So it's important to have external validation of people who's just from people getting external validation from people who are just there to evaluate you, not to make money off of the application and so on, just evaluating a product. It's important because it's necessarily going to be a different evaluating process than it's going to be when you yourself are evaluating the thing you developed. The final principle is not mentioned at all. It could be, by the way, the last principle is respect for the user, in case you forgot. It's also not mentioned. It could be because it depends on the client. Once again, it's a software house. They don't have as much a say in what happens to that software than they do when it comes to developing your own software. So this could be because it depends on the client and on the and on the application. They do say they comply with our GDPR. However, GDPR is law, and you're not going to get flowers for following the law. It's like saying, "Oh yeah, no, you deserve $1 million because you haven't killed anyone yet." Like, that's not how it works. You're following the law. This drives me up the fucking wall, by the way, when people say, "Oh yeah, no, we take security very seriously. We follow GDPR." No shit, that's the fucking law. You're going to get fined if you don't follow it. Anyways, sorry, I'm just done with corporate bullshit. Yeah, no mention of the user, no mention of user data and so on. They just follow GDPR, they follow ISO 6 something something. It's specific to Portugal, I think. Yeah, I think it's specific to Portugal. It's also law. So congrats, you're following the fucking law. Anyways, why does this matter? Why am I so pent up over this? It's because if companies misuse terms, think what happened to VPNs. People think they know what VPNs are about. They don't. The public will change its view on a term if they see it misused often enough. If someone doesn't know what something means, how a VPN works, for example, what security by design means, and someone says, "Hey, I know what it means, and it's this and this thing," they're going to believe you, and this is not good. There's a reason. Scientific knowledge. It's important to know what like yeah, like if some things have meaning, words have meaning, use it. Don't let yeah, basically, yeah, it's academic knowledge means stuff. So next steps for the company itself, I did address the company in my presentation. Change your presentation. Either focus on security by design principles, even you could even say, yes, we follow this principle, doing this, and this. We also follow this principle with these caveats, and we can't tell you more because of NDAs or something like that. Just either focus on security by design principles, and if you're going to use the name, because they were using the name, the the presentation was security by design at company. Either stick to the principles or use a different term. Don't use don't use terms when you mean something else or you're not giving us enough information for us to ensure you're talking about that other thing. You know what I mean? So yeah, sorry I went on a little bit of a rant. I've had a horrible week. I keep having fucking dreams about my thesis advisor. It's been I've had two this week, which is not a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice in a single week, and it's only fucking Thursday. um, yeah, I've been sleeping poorly again. I had a shitty doctor's appointment. It's those doctor's appointment. Their appointments are like, "Oh, uh, I didn't find anything wrong with you." When it's like, "No, there's definitely something wrong with me. Make me do more things so you can know what it fucking is instead of just." It's just been shitty, And yeah, I'm going to be very busy for the next couple of weeks, months, maybe following year. because of my thesis. I just delivered yesterday the first document, but it's just the introduction and state of the art. So now it's just work on the code base itself. It's a lot of work. Obviously, it's a master's fucking thesis. Um, but hopefully something good will come out of it, and I'll, you know, my work will mean something. I mean, it probably won't. It's just a thing I'm doing, but it's not going to be a product that normal users could use in a year or 2 or 3. It's a thing like it's cutting edge stuff. It's research stuff. Yeah, sorry. I just went on a rant. um, yeah. Bye.